Hello and welcome to this edition of Mixed Media. I'm Trevor Naleppa. With me today is Kim Gordon, local photographer, entrepreneur, a little bit of do-it-all. How are you doing today?
Great, good day. Thanks for the invitation.
Good, good. I see starting off that you're wearing a kilt, apparently Scottish heritage.
Yes, as a matter of fact, I'm very involved with the local Scottish community. I'm on the board of directors of the Seven Rivers Highland Association, which is an association that's deeply involved in the St. Louis community. We do a lot of charitable contribution back to the community, as well as we have a subgroup of which I'm the chair called the Green Hand Scots. We're involved with Clean Stream, planting trees, Arbor Day festivities, things along those lines. And then I'm also on the board of directors of the International House of Gordon, which is a family heritage organization. So it's fun.
You also do a lot of photography in Scotland. Is that one of your favorite places
I've done
to visit?
quite a bit of photography in Scotland, not much in Ireland, but I plan to add that to my portfolio.
That's good. What kind of photography do you focus on? I mean, is there a specific kind? Or
yeah, generally I'm what is known as a found object photographer, and by that I mean it is photography of old farm implements, anything to do with landscape, anything to do with farming communities, and which by extension is also abandoned barns, abandoned farmhouses. They just have a mystique that I'm really interested in. So landscape, found objects, and then abandoned property, I suppose.
And what got you into photography when you were growing up? Were you
oh
always
my goodness,
interested
that's an interesting story. When I was 14 years old, my great aunt Sarah, God bless her soul, gave me my first camera, and she ignited an interest in photography that has never abated. I'm one of those people that have had a darkroom in my life ever since I was 15 years of age.
And what kind of photography do you use? Do you deal with? Is it strictly digital nowadays, or do you do both? Types of photography, old slide.
And actually I brought a couple of cameras as examples with me. I'm a firm believer in capturing light, and so I will use a wide variety of tools in order to accomplish that mission. Sometimes it is this 4x5 view camera, which we'll demonstrate in a little bit. Sometimes it's digital, sometimes it's a peculiar mix of three-dimensional photography or extremely wide range, wide angle photography. So whatever tool happens to strike my fancy, I normally carry with me 8 or 9 cameras, and whatever the scene seems to dictate to me, that's the camera I choose when I shoot.
What were some of your biggest influences growing up? Some photographers, or not even photographers, just people in general that influenced you in your photography?
One of the most compelling interests that it once again ignited further my interest in photography was I was high school journalism, and then in college I was also part of the journalistic staff. I don't consider myself a journalistic photographer anymore. However, the journalistic impression, the viewpoint, is still part of my photography.
I saw on a website I was looking at about you that you also were involved with NPR, National Public Radio.
Yes.
Goes back to your journalistic days.
Yes.
Do you do stuff with the radio still? Or?
No, generally all of my artwork, and we will talk a little bit later about my show, all of my artwork now is of what I consider trying to capture fractals, trying to capture the harmony of a scene, and we can elaborate on that as well.
Yeah, elaborate on fractals a little bit.
All right.
The composition, what drives your
This
goals?
is the conversation that could go on to the wee hours of the morning. But at its core, if you look up the word fractals in Google, you'll discover that fractals are a mathematical algorithm that seem to dictate geometric patterns in nature. So for example, if you take a hard look at a sunflower, and you'll notice the pattern, the spiral pattern that's inherent in a sunflower, there's a mathematical algorithm that describes that pattern. And those mathematical algorithms are all over. They're in a maple leaf, they're in a flowing stream, they're in a pear tree. And so part of my challenge as a photographer is, since I am so enamored with the fact that the universe seems to be constructed at a fundamental level with some mathematical algorithms, it's my job as a photographer to capture those, because photons and light and shadow are nothing but an abstraction of that mathematical algorithm. Once again, we could talk wee hours
all
in the
day
morning.
about that. Talking, you finished up there a little bit about light. You do a lot of black and white photography along with color. Do you prefer one or the other more? Or do
I
you like
tend
doing
to,
both?
actually one of the experiments that I've been doing lately is I'm shooting in color and then I'm transposing the image to both a color photograph and a black and white photograph. Now there are some theories out there on why we are so emotionally tied to a black and white image, and the one that I personally subscribe to that I've kind of elaborated on is the difference in the way your eye perceives color versus black and white is the difference between the way your brain is actually processing the information. Black and white is processed by an older part of our brain. Color is processed by a newer part of our brain. Therefore, the black and white imagery seems to impact us at a much more fundamental level, which is why I enjoy black and white so much, because I think you can elicit a great emotional response with a well-crafted, well-executed black and white photograph that you simply can't get to with a color photograph.
And in using color and black and white, are there different types of cameras to get each of the ones, or can you use the same type of camera to do both color and?
All of my black and white work now let me rephrase that. Most of my black and white work today is done with the 4x5 view camera. However, since I'm relatively new to digital, I've only owned the digital camera for about 1.5 to 2 years, I'm finding that I shoot everything in color and then I cut it to monochrome in the digital studio, the digital darkroom, using tools like Photoshop. So I try not to let the hardware dictate what I need to do. I try to have myself dictate to the hardware what I'm trying to accomplish.
You said before the show that you prefer digital photography over the old version of photography. Most photographers that I've talked to prefer it the other way. Why do you prefer digital?
I think instead of use the word prefer, I'd use the word advocate. I'm a firm believer in everybody ought to be shooting everything all the time. And so, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, if you were shooting 200 or 300 images a day, very few people could afford to process them. From my view, good art, good photography, to a certain point, is a numbers game. And so if you want one good photograph, you've got to shoot 1,000 images, and one of those will be one of them that captures you. You just simply can't get to those numbers if you're shooting film. The other thing that I'm an advocate of digital photography is that the more people I see with a digital camera, even if it's a $29 camera that they picked up at the local wholesale house, people are looking, they're documenting, they're taking family photographs, so I suppose what I'd tell you is that digital, I think, is caused an explosion in people really looking at the world around them, and I advocate that. That's something that I firmly believe that we ought to be looking at, because it's a fascinating world.
Yeah, I saw on your website you put on there, people just need to stop and look and take in things from around the world. Through your travels, Scotland and various other places, has there been anything where you said, I should have been there, I didn't get there, but I wanted to be there?
In terms of photography?
Well, either photography or life.
Actually, I would like to spend a lot more in the north of the Highlands, and because that satisfies me individually for some of my personal interests, but also my photography. There's nothing quite like being in the northern zones and watching the northern lights, and then having your brain sit there with a nice camera and trying to figure out how you're going to capture any of that imagery. The light changes the further north you get, and the angle of view. Actually, this is my favorite time of year to shoot imagery, is from fall and to the dead of winter, because the light is so low on the horizon that the shadow details is just, it will knock you down. As long as you're watching, which is really part of the experiment. You have to look before you're going to be able to take the photograph.